Hi, it's great to be with you through a video screen this morning. This is my last Sunday with you for 6 weeks. Tomorrow on Monday, I start my 6 weeks half sabbatical leave. Do please pray for Martin and uh, Lance and Lynette, Charlie, Gail, and everyone else as they fill in gaps that I would otherwise have filled myself over the next 6 weeks. And do please continue to pray for us as a family during this period, as we try and get some rest and refreshment after what has been a particularly difficult year for us in many ways. That's really all I want to say about that. But if you have any questions about the sabbatical, then it's best to get in touch with Lance or Lynette or Martin himself. I'd also love you to take the time to watch the video that I uploaded on Thursday, which is a talk that I've given in lieu of my annual reflections that we would have had at an annual church vestry meeting had we been able to have that. It's not a formal annual report, but it does offer some thankful reflections and some prayerful thoughts as we anticipate 2021 together. I really would love you to watch that, please, and give it some prayerful consideration over the next few weeks and the issues it raises regarding our life together and how we shape ourselves going into 2021. So this morning we're concluding our series looking at the signs that Jesus gives us in John's Gospel. Signs, miracles, which tell us something about who Jesus is, what he does, and the sort of life we are drawn into and invited into as people who worship and serve this Jesus. As we've said before, all of these miracles in John's Gospel are referred to as signs because they are signposts. They both as things that actually happened and beyond that have a wider relevance to communicate something important to us, and we're trying to consider what that is. And this last chapter of John's Gospel, containing a couple of different things, really draws that all together. So we've looked at John 21. We've had that read to us, and maybe if you've got it open in front of you, that would be really helpful. So the resurrected Jesus appears again by the Sea of Galilee with Peter and Thomas, Nathaniel, sons of Zebedee, and a couple of others who aren't named. This time, before Jesus has appeared to them by the Sea of Galilee, Peter, in what appears to be quite depressed, maybe pessimistic state, says, "I'm going out to fish." And the others join him. But all night they catch nothing. They work hard. Fishing at night is dangerous, but they catch nothing. And at the end of that night's hard labour, Jesus is on the shore. But as before, they don't recognise him at first. He calls out to them, "Haven't you caught any fish?" "No," they reply. And he shouts back at them across the water, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some." And they do that. And they're unable to bring the net in because there's so many. Peter recognises him, jumps out of the boat and runs towards him on the shore, and they bring the boat with them. They sail to shore in the boat, kind of following behind Peter, and they haul this huge catch of fish in. 153. It's a slightly strange, fascinating little detail to get the precise number. But even with so many, says John, the net was not torn. Jesus invites them for breakfast. And by this point, John says they know who this is. Jesus takes bread, gives it to them, does the same with the fish. And as John says in verse 14, this is now the third time Jesus appeared to the disciples after he's raised from the dead. And then it moves on. They've had breakfast. Jesus takes Simon Peter for a walk, and he asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter replies, "You know that I love you." 3 times Jesus says to Peter, "Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep." It's a tangible and moving echo of the 3 denials that Peter has made of Jesus before his crucifixion. And then we conclude with these words in verses 24 and 25. This is the disciple. John is speaking about himself as the writer. This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. And it's with that concluding statement that I want to start this morning. John writes this to testify, and by this he means the whole of his gospel, all of it, including this chapter that we're looking at this morning. John has written his whole gospel, and he says, I can tell you because I was there, this is what happened. It's true. As I speak this morning, on Saturday morning, a few days after the American election, well, at least a few days after the votes were cast, of course we don't have an official result yet, but of course you'll be aware that as I speak, a lot of spurious accusations and claims are being made by Donald Trump and his team about voter fraud and the like, for which there is no evidence at all. No one has reported any as an eyewitness. No one has offered any evidence as yet that this is the case. And yet, here we have the leader of America, the president of America, throwing out these accusations. And that stands in stark contrast to what John is doing here, calmly, in a considered way, saying, look, I was there. I can testify that this is true. These aren't just stories. Somebody saw this happen. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that we aren't like Thomas in some respects, and we don't find ourselves doubting and struggling to believe. And as I've said so many times when we've considered Thomas, that's not a bad or wrong space to be in if that's you. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to say, I'm struggling to believe that today. And we know that Jesus seeks Thomas out and doesn't dismiss him and doesn't tell him off for his doubts. But it is important to note in that context that these signs, these miracles, this Jesus we're talking about isn't just a story. It's a flesh and blood thing. These are events that people testify to. And that's what's behind as well this idea of Jesus inviting the disciples here after they've got their 153 fish to have breakfast with him. Because what we're talking about here in terms of Jesus, the Jesus who is with the disciples and inviting them for breakfast, he is no ghost. This is Jesus. Ghosts don't eat breakfast. Ghosts don't invite you to a braai on the beach. This is a flesh and blood Jesus resurrected. A Jesus with a perfected, transcendent body which is more real and more tangible even in the walls and the locked doors which kept the disciples inside for fear of what was going on around them a few days ago. He is no ghost, he is real. He eats and shares and talks and listens. And that is what we see here, and it's what we see throughout the signs that John records for us in his Gospels. In the turning of the water into wine, the healing of the man blind from birth, the raising of Lazarus, the walking on the water, and all those other signs. This is no story. This is a flesh and blood Jesus with a body that suffered, that died, and that was physically raised. This happened, and this happens. This Jesus is no ethereal ghost, but is a real, tangible person. Which says to us that our tangible bodily lives matter. We are not to dismiss anything as so earthly that Jesus could not possibly be concerned about it, because otherwise he would not have bothered to be incarnated as a flesh and blood human being who was bodily raised to life and who awaits us with a new physical creation for us to join him in flesh and blood. Every part of our lives, John's Gospel shows us, is sanctified, is made holy by this real, tangible, living, dying, resurrected, ascended and glorified Jesus. Nothing, no part of our lives is irrelevant. No part of our lives is too lowly. There is no such thing as secular. We talk about secular careers in the secular world as if they have nothing to do with God. But that's not true. The great Dutch theologian Abraham Kuyper, I've quoted before, as saying that there is no part of creation over which Jesus does not say, "This is mine." And that includes every part of your life. Every part of your life, of my life, of our lives is included in what Jesus says, "This is mine." So there is no such thing as secular. Nothing is excluded from Jesus' interest and concern and his reign and his power. So if it matters to you, it matters to Jesus. You do not need to be ashamed of it mattering to you. You do not need to hide it away. You can bring it to Jesus in prayer, and you can bring it to Jesus' people and say, "Help me with this, because it matters to me, and because it matters to me, it matters to Jesus, and because it matters to Jesus, it should matter to you also." Do not be afraid to ask Jesus and your brothers and sisters in Christ for help, because every part of your life matters, and Jesus has come to be with you in every part of your life, here and now. You do not need to wait. That by no means it's all going to be easy and plain sailing. Quite the opposite of that. It's always going to be hard in different ways. But there is nothing you can't bring to him. There is nothing you can't ask him to help with, because these signs that take in so much of our lives, so much of our human experience, show us that Jesus is intimately concerned with us. And it also shows us a Jesus transcending and including our suffering. So we don't have to be alone in our suffering and our asking for help. And we don't have to transcend it ourselves, living in some kind of permanent state of artificial victory, as if there is no such thing as a problem. Because it's Jesus who transcends and who scoops us up into his transcendence. He does it in us and for us, because we can't transcend it ourselves. He takes us into this bigger reality than ours, where water can be transformed into wine, where physical bodies are resurrected, where people blind from birth have their sight restored, where he resurrects a dead friend even after he has cried at his graveside. So we don't need to not suffer. We don't need to not find it difficult. We don't need to strive and to seek and to put on a perma grin to make look as if there's no problem and everything's okay. Because Jesus cried. Because Jesus appeared on a beachside after depressed, lonely people had spent all night fishing and found nothing. Jesus appears then. He appears in the suffering, in the struggle, at the moment of need, at the moment of difficulty. He says, "I am here and I transcend this, and I also meet you in it." He both meets us in it and he transcends it in a way that gives us profound and deep hope, even in the midst of the most difficult and painful suffering and doubt and fear we can experience. And not only does he do that, but he still cares enough for you and for me to address our deepest wounds, to deal with our denials of him, and to give us a role in his work and his kingdom going forward. Because after breakfast, he then takes Peter for this walk and asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" Which, as you know, echoes his 3 denials, reinstates him after his 3 denials, and gives Peter the confidence to know that those 3 denials have been addressed by Jesus and they have been tenderly reshaped into an awareness that Peter needs Jesus. And even despite his denials, he still has a role to play in his kingdom, feeding Jesus's sheep. Peter now doesn't need to worry about what Jesus is doing with others. Peter in verse 21 says, "But what about him?" Meaning probably John. And Jesus replies, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You follow me." You see, if we are stuck in our denials and our failures and our brokenness, then what we'll do is we'll think, but that other person's better than me, and that other person's got a better role in the kingdom than me because they're better than me, they don't deny Jesus like me, they're not broken like me. But here we see Jesus saying, no, it's not like that, because I meet you, Peter, I meet you, David, I meet you, insert your name here, listening to this. I meet you at the point of your failure, and I forgive you, and I reinstate you. So you don't need to worry about what I'm doing with other people. If I want that person to lead a church of 1,000, if I want that person to have this job, it doesn't matter to you. It's not your concern. Don't worry. Don't compare yourself to them. It's not about you. It's about me dealing with them. I deal with you and I forgive you. I reinstate you. I heal you. And I give you a role. Yes, you denied me, but that is forgiven. Now, feed my sheep. Where is Jesus meeting you? Throughout 2020, for whatever reason, you may well have found yourself saying, I can't cope. It's okay. You may have questioned or be questioning God. It's okay. You may be counting yourself out of a role in the church. Now, that's not true. You have a role in God's service because God comes to you. Jesus meets you. He meets you in your suffering, in your brokenness, and he transcends it for you so you don't have to. And he catches you up in his transcendence and heals you and reinstates you. Isn't that wonderful? It is very, very good news. This last verse of John's Gospel is tantalizing. It says this, verse 25. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. We could speculate for hours, and people do, about what John means there. What other things did he do? I don't even know, to be honest, if once we join Jesus in the new creation, resurrected as he has been resurrected, I don't even know then if we'll know what those other things were, although I kind of hope that we do. For now, we don't need to know. Because these things written down, these things recorded by people who were there, these things passed on, are there to show us this Jesus who gathers every inch of our lives up in his life, in his lived experience as a human being, and both enters into it with us and transcends that, and catches us up in that transcendence. That's what this gospel is for, and that's what these signs are for. That you may know that your life in all its details matters to Jesus. And he meets you in those details. And he is there to meet you at the point of your need and pain and brokenness, and to say, let me remake that. Let me transcend that and bring you into my transcendence, so that you don't have to strive to escape from it, but allow me to shine a light through the cracks in your jars of clay. As Leonard Cohen wrote, that we quote many times, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's what it means for our brokenness to be caught up in his transcendence, so that he transcending means we don't have to. This is heady stuff, but it's deeply personal and everyday. Your life in all its details and all its mundaneness and all its pain matters. And Jesus meets you in it, he remakes you in it, and he gives you a role going forward, this side of our resurrection, into a new physical life and in the life to come. May we, as a church, thinking about our year that is drawing gradually to an end, and the year 2021 that will come after, may we as a church know that every area of our lives is open to him, matters to him, can be presented to him, and can be presented to each other as we ask for help. May we know that our pain matters, and that he meets us in it, gathers us up into his transcendence, so that we don't need to strive. And may we know that we each have a role to play, because he meets us at the point of our failures and reinstates us. Where have you failed? Where are you in desperate need? Let Jesus meet you there. And let him say to you, and I want you to put your name here. Your name, says Jesus. Dave, your name. Feed my sheep. He has a role for you. Let him show you what it is. Amen.